Towards Peace is a chapter about Wangari Maathai, who was born in Kenya and grew up there. A bright student, she won a scholarship to study in the USA. Wangari returned to teach at the University of Nairobi, Kenya. For her compassion and efforts as an environmentalist and a fighter for democratic human rights, she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2004. She was the first African woman and the first environmentalist to win a Nobel Peace Prize. She believed that concern for the environment was central to any peace program. She made us realize that if we kept degrading the environment, there never would be peace on earth. She inspired others to continue planting trees and forests. So it is the story of Wangari Maathai who fought for environment, and she is known as a great environmentalist who was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2004. And she was the first African woman, first environmentalist to win a Nobel Peace Prize. Let's see what is her story about. Wangari Maathai's passion for trees and concern for the environment grew out of her love for a village and the rural countryside she grew up in. She had a passion for trees. She had a concern for environment. It was because she was born in such a surrounding, a rural countryside. She learned to respect nature from her grandmother and others in the family. She spoke about a large fig tree near her family home that her grandmother said was sacred. She would get water for the house from the springs protected by the roots of that tree. Wangari Maathai, she learned to respect nature from her grandmother. She got that inspiration from her family. She spoke of a fig tree which was the part of her family and that was regarded as sacred. And she would get water for the house from the springs protected from the river protected by the roots of that tree. She said about 200 yards away from the fig tree was a stream named Kanagu, with water so clean, so and fresh that we drank it straight from the stream. She's talking about the days when there was no pollution. She speaks that they had such a stream from where they could directly take water and drink it. Now we need many equipments to clarify the water. When Wangari was young, not many girls got a chance to go to school from rural Kenya, but luckily Wangari's family saw that she was bright and sent her to school. She was smart enough to win a scholarship to study in the USA. After finishing college, she came back to Kenya to teach at the University of Nairobi. She was the first woman to get a PhD in East and Central Africa and the first woman to head a department in a university. Such was her achievement. During those days, girls weren't sent to school even in foreign countries like Kenya. Since her family was a good one, they realized that she was a bright girl, so she could achieve great heights in the field of education, so she was sent to school. And after finishing college, she came back to Kenya to teach at the University of Nairobi. She was first woman to get a PhD in East and Central Africa and the first woman to head a department in a university. Wangari was very successful and could have led a peaceful and comfortable life. However, on her return, she found that widespread deforestation had caused terrible malnutrition and famine was stalking the land. She had achieved great things. She would have led a peaceful and comfortable life. She could get all the luxuries of life, but when she came back to Kenya, she found that there was deforestation. The trees were cut down and it had caused terrible malnutrition everywhere. Famine had spread out. Earlier, we lived in a land abundant with shrubs, creepers, ferns, and trees. Because rain fell regularly and reliably, clean drinking water was everywhere. There were large, well-watered fields of maize, beans, wheat, and vegetables. Hunger was virtually unknown, she said about the landscape of her childhood. After looking at that famine affected area, she recalled the memories of her childhood when they had so many shrubs, creepers, ferns, and trees. It was because the rain was there. There were large, well watered fields of maize, beans, wheat, vegetables. Wangari wondered what happened to that lush land. Why couldn't women get clean water and healthy food for their families? Going down to the root of the problem, she realized that the land had to be reforested. Something had to be done about it, and she decided that that something was to plant trees. She began the Green Belt movement in a small nursery in her garden, which later grew into a huge organization that has planted millions of trees in Africa. So she wondered what was the root cause of that. So, going deep inside that root problem, she realized that the need of the hour was to plant more and more trees. So she began the Green Belt movement in a small nursery in her garden, which later became a huge organization. Deforestation had occurred as in many other places in the world because forests had been cut down to grow cash crops for export or to build high rise buildings. She came to know what was the reason of deforestation. It was to grow cash crops, the commercial crops, in order to earn more and more money. Thus, the poor and the disadvantaged, many of them women and children, got pushed into poverty and hunger. Connecting the dots, Wangari realized that to fix the environment, she had to fight for people's rights and democracy. She realized that the poor and the disadvantaged suffered a lot. They were pushed into poverty and hunger. She realized that she had to fight for people's rights and democracy. The then president of Kenya called her a mad woman because she protested against schemes that could harm the environment. She was often beaten during the protests. She led and went to jail many times. But she persevered with her fight. When asked what kept her fighting, she told the story of the hummingbird that her mother had told her. So, even she protested against the schemes of the government which harmed the environment. But the then president also was against her. He called her a mad woman. She was even beaten up, taken to jail, but then also she strived hard, worked hard, and fought for the rights of the poor people. And she told the story of the hummingbird. This is the story. Once there was a terrible forest fire. All the animals came out of the forest and stood on the edge transfixed. As they watched the forest burning, they felt powerless except for this one hummingbird. The hummingbird took what water it could in its tiny beak and threw it on the blaze. As it whirred its wings and flew again and again from the stream to the fire, the animals watched helplessly, including much bigger animals like the elephant, which could have carried a lot of water in its trunk. So she speaks about a story in which once there was a terrible forest fire. All the animals, they came at the edge of the forest and they were all confused what to do, what not to do. Even the bigger animals were confused. They felt powerless except one hummingbird. Even the elephants they did not come forward for any help, though they could have carried a lot of water in their trunks. They told the hummingbird, "What do you think you can do? You are too little and the fire is too big. How can you help?" The little hummingbird turned to them without wasting any time and said, "I'm doing the best I can, and that to me is what all of us should do." Though the animals discouraged the hummingbird, saying that what can you do? You are so little. But the reply of the hummingbird was that I'm doing the best I can, and that to me is what all of us should do. So Wangari said, I will be that hummingbird. I know that I can make a difference. And she was all her life. It has made a difference. People are more aware that war, peace, democracy, human rights, and the degradation of the environment are all connected. We cannot solve a problem in isolation without considering everything else. As she said in her Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech, sustainable development, democracy, and peace are indivisible. She never looked back. She made people realize that war, peace, democracy, human rights, degradation of environment all are connected to each other. We cannot solve a problem sitting alone. We have to work hard, and this was the speech which she made during her Nobel Peace Prize acceptance. And the speech had become very famous.